Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Crime in the 3-Pound Meatloaf.
We're really excited about today's episode. This is one of the most interesting topics we've ever spoken about. Let's get started.
Okay. Imagine sitting in an interrogation room, exhausted, confused, and desperate to get out of there ASAP. The detectives say they understand you. You just need to tell them what happened, and then you can go home. Hours pass, the pressure mounts, and finally, you confess. But there's just one problem. You didn't do it.
Ooh.
I want to talk about why innocent people confess to crimes they did not commit. I can't think of a psychologically more profound question. If I were to ask the average person, would you ever confess to a crime you did not commit? Everybody would say no.
False confessions happen more often than we think, and they have led to countless wrongful convictions. But why do innocent people confess to crimes they didn't commit? In today's episode, we will explore the interrogation techniques that make this possible and look at real cases where these tactics resulted in devastating consequences.
Let's start with the Central Park Five. In 1989, 5 Black and Latino teenagers, Kevin, Raymond, Antron, Yusuf, and Corey, were accused of brutally assaulting and raping a jogger in Central Park. They were between the ages of 14 and 16 at the time.
And the police interrogation, it lasted for hours. These kids were left without their parents, and detectives used every trick in the book to pressure them into confessing. They were lied to, yelled at, and told they could go home if they just admitted to the crime. Eventually, they each confessed, giving different and inconsistent stories that didn't match the actual evidence. A decade later, the real perpetrator, Matthias Reyes, confessed, and DNA evidence proved the boys were innocent.
The key technique used to obtain their confessions? The Reed technique, a widely used police interrogation method that has been criticized for leading to false confessions.
So what exactly is the Reed technique?
The Reed technique is an interrogation method developed in the 1950s that relies on psychological pressure and manipulation to extract confessions. It's a 7-step process, systematically increases stress, making suspects, especially juveniles and individuals with intellectual disabilities, more vulnerable to coercion.
A key psychological effect is cognitive dissonance, where suspects experience mental discomfort due to conflicting beliefs about their guilt. Through false evidence and high-pressure tactics, the technique forces them to doubt their own innocence. Under prolonged stress, their compliance increases, making them more likely to confess just to escape the negative environment they're in.
By exploiting fear, obedience to authority, and psychological fatigue, the Reed technique prioritizes confession over truth, raising ethical concerns about false confessions and coercion. Wow, that was intense.
Alright, so we've talked about the Reed technique, but there's another key interrogation technique that may lead to false confessions: minimization and maximization.
Could you break it down for us, Cass?
Minimization is when the detective downplays the seriousness of the crime or offers moral justification.
Yeah, so like saying, we know this was just an accident. You didn't mean to do it. If you just tell us what happened, then we could help you. You see, this builds trust with the suspect, making them believe that admitting guilt would lead to a lesser punishment or maybe even leniency.
But suddenly, maximization flips the script. The detective exaggerates the severity of the crime and sentence, making the suspect feel like their only way out is to confess.
This greatly enhances the stress felt by the suspect, caused by the sudden change from trust to then accusations.
The combination of minimization and maximization is psychologically overpowering. It essentially distorts the suspect's understanding of the situation and the consequences of their supposed actions.
So, let's look at a real-world example of this. The case of Marty Tankliff. He was just 17 years old when he was accused of murdering his parents. During the interrogation, officers used minimization tactics, telling them that if he had blacked out and committed the crime in a rage, then maybe it would be understandable.
Meanwhile, detectives used maximization by insisting they had overwhelming evidence against him and claiming his own father had accused him on his deathbed, which was a lie. Under pressure, he started to question his own memory and eventually confessed. 17 years after he was incarcerated, new evidence proved his innocence.
This case shows how these psychological tactics can make someone doubt their own reality. And once a confession is made, it's hard to undo, even when there's no real evidence. So, to wrap things up, false confessions don't happen by accident. They're the result of high-pressure interrogation tactics that are still legal in many places.
And that's all we have for today, folks.
See you next week on Crime in the 3-Pound Meatloaf.